Welcome to the Anthro to UX podcast, where you will learn how to break into UX with an anthropology degree. Through conversations with leading anthropologists working in user experience, you will learn firsthand how others made the transition, what they learned along the way, and what they would do differently. We will be discussing what it means to do UX research from a practical perspective and what you need to do to prepare a resume and portfolio. I'm your host, Matt Artz, a business anthropologist specializing in design anthropology and working at the intersection of product management, user experience, and business strategy. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Matt Artz of Anthro to UX. I'm here today with Melissa Krug, who's a qualitative UX researcher at AnswerLab, and we'll be talking today a little bit about her more recent process of transitioning into UX and how she decided, that was the right field. And so, Melissa, thanks for joining us. Would you mind by starting, just tell everybody a little bit about your anthropological origin story?
Sure. Great. Thanks for having me. Also, Matt. And like you said, I'm fairly new to UX, so I can definitely say that there's some imposter syndrome going on right now. I was listening to your podcast when I was doing the transition into UX. As for my origin story, I was a bookish kind of child, and I kind of thought about myself as like, someday I'll be a scientist, and I didn't know what that would mean, but that was always my goal. So I kind of, I was always interested in languages and cultures, travel. I actually had the opportunity to volunteer with my grandmother. She volunteered at 10,000 villages in the warehouse. And I started going with her when I was just really young and seeing all the different handicrafts and things from, so I got kind of a sense of global economics and poverty and cultures there. So that kind of got me thinking about anthropology, but I actually started my undergrad thinking I was going to be a marine geophysicist. So it took maybe a semester or two and a cultural anthropology class to, open my eyes to that anthropology encompassed all of my interests, and I could be, I was able to study, anything that humans were doing or primates even. So it just really was all encompassing. It let me look at languages and culture. And there was that idea of I could travel and just immerse myself in a culture. So that was always really exciting to me. And so, I was double major in Spanish and anthropology in undergrad. Took a couple different career moves after undergrad before I did my PhD. And, I found myself back in anthropology.
And you did linguistic anthropology for your PhD?
Yeah, at Temple University. Yep. And I studied in Peru in a fair trade organization. So that was kind of the thread of come back to fair trade as well. And I studied with a fair trade organization based in Lima, doing handicraft production there, and went around the country. And I was working with Quechua-speaking artisans there.
And so where in that PhD process did you discover UX?
Probably close to the end, actually. So I kind of thought that UX was for, tech people, people who had maybe always been very involved in, maybe even coding. I kind of had all of these myths that I bought into about what UX was. And it was intimidating to me, honestly, to read a job description or, see all these words that I didn't know. So I kind of put UX into, the back of my mind. And I was looking originally at nonprofit jobs because of my prior experience. So throughout my PhD, that was really my focus. And thinking, when I was done, I was going to look into nonprofit work and different organizations. UX wasn't on my radar until recently.
And so did somebody in the program mention it, whether that's another student or faculty, or did you find it just when searching for what am I going to do for a job as an anthropologist?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll tell my graduation story to give some context to this circuitous route to finding UX. I was set to defend my dissertation in March of 2020. So I had my plane ticket and my hotel booked. So I had to go back to Philadelphia. I live in Denver now. So I was just ready to defend in person, and everything shut down. And so the world changed in March 2020. And, I was totally blindsided of course, by the pandemic, but also for my career moves, and just kind of left. Okay, well, I have a PhD. Now what? And the careers that I expected to be able to find and pursue with a nonprofit kind of search, they were very hard to find. I spent a couple of months looking for nonprofit positions, fully expecting that I'd have to work my way up. So, looking for entry level things. I was able to find a consultancy type of role for a nonprofit consulting. So they were doing strategic planning and surveys type of work. And so I was writing some grants and doing some kind of monitoring and evaluation work. And I was also, within that time period, it was, a scary kind of time. And so I was getting part-time work from the consultancy. And then I was doing some searches for like maybe publishing, or, just really thinking about what kind of transferable skills did I have from my program. And yeah, I found UX, I guess, kind of, far into the process. About a year into the job search, if I'm honest, and I was doing informational interviews throughout, and I just started to see, more UX jobs popping up on the job boards. Like, oh, they are hiring, and it was more kind of consistent across the job descriptions. So for nonprofit roles, they all had different titles and things like that. So I was kind of able to see like, oh, okay, these, they might be new kind of terms to me at that point, but I was able to, see the consistency over them. So, as more people talk to me about UX, and I found that community seemed like, oh, my skills could be useful there, and it wouldn't, it's not too techy, or like there's not coding involved, things like that. So that helped to broaden my understanding, and eventually started, interviewing for UX roles and things. Once I found UX and learned how to position those skills in a resume and talk about them in the UX kind of lingo and business forward talk, things moved much quicker than as far as finding the job.
So let's dig into that a bit. So you mentioned a few things there, earlier in that response. You mentioned transferable skills, and then you mentioned sort of towards the end, in my words, not yours, reframing it. And so, when you were thinking about transferable skills, even before you were thinking about how to best present them on a resume for a UX role, what kind of skills did you identify, in your head or on paper that you thought were very transferable?
Yeah, well, anthropology, allows you so many ways. First, if you are talking kind of the nitty gritty of an interview, right? We know how to phrase a question and build rapport so that your, participants feel comfortable, and, to avoid bias, and to just phrase a question to what kind of context is going to come up, and the kind of response that might happen, and also on the flip side of things, how things might broaden out that you weren't expecting. I think anthropologists have that sense of where it might lead, and how to limit that as well. There's also a sense of being able to jump from a small scale to a big picture. Anthropologists have that holistic view, and if you see a product develop over time, you're able to get that kind of context and understand the user personas and things like that, the context of their life. So, I really like to ask questions about, how does this product fit into your overall life? Because no product is in a bubble. And so that gives you the sense of where it might, a broader sense from maybe other people's viewpoints of what a product would do for people. And, time management, project management, client management, or stakeholder management, as far as, people skills. Your soft skills are very important in, at least, I work in a consultancy, so that's, but, if you worked in-house as well, you would have to interpret people's needs, share out the findings in a way that everyone there can access that information in similar ways and do what they need from there. So you have a lot of skills, and I would even say, anthropologists live in that space of uncertainty, and you are used to throwing yourself into a new context where you're not the expert and asking questions where, you might feel like you should know the answer, or people will look at you like, why don't you know this answer? And that's a good thing to get used to in UX, or probably any field especially where you're new. You know that you have to ask questions, and it's okay to be a novice. And to just, it also helps to build empathy with your participants, because you know that they're the experts, same as in anthropology. So lots of good skills to bring over.
For sure. Now, I completely agree with you on all that. But something like holism, which maybe you use the word because of the conversation that we're having today, but a word like that certainly needs to be reframed for a resume. So did you, what was your process like to learn how to reframe, this traditional sort of anthropological schooling and language to, what ultimately worked for you to get into AnswerLab?
Yeah. I watched a lot of YouTube videos and, thinking about how to deconstruct a job description. And so I mapped out, or I made lists of what I have done previously, and looked at the job descriptions and really tried to analyze, linguistic anthropology. I just took that approach to the job description, and what might this mean in my history? How can I apply whatever I did and then phrase it in those words that they were using? So something like in-depth interviews. Well, I did, ethnographic interviews, semi-structured interviews. And so those are, comparable, similar. And so I phrased it that way. There were certainly new terms and things. So you have to, build that knowledge. Also, I did a lot of YouTubing that way, and informational interviews. But yeah, the basics you have, and from anthropology.
And so as a new researcher without that background, I'm curious just to hear, how did it go as you first stepped into the role?
It's very fast paced. That's a difference from anthropology, and certainly from a PhD program. It's much more independent. Well, I'm not sure if it's more independent or just kind of in a different way. So you have, your PhD advisor who can always read something or give you advice. You can share with your peers. And there's definitely a lot of sharing at AnswerLab, and lots of the ability to ask questions, but the speed is different. So to get someone to bounce ideas around, it's just kind of, taking into consideration their timing and your timing. And so I was I'm the only researcher on projects with different client teams. So they, expected expertise and right away. And, I was ready to, jump in. But the ability to ask questions with a walkthrough, to be ready to just take in. And, every client team has their way of talking about their products and different strategies. So to be able to quickly kind of take in that information and know what questions to ask took some time. I would say that would be the most challenging element, to know that you can ask questions and that indicates that you're be close listening. Your questions are a great thing, actually. And to just have that kind of back and forth and bounce around. You are the expert, but you don't have to know everything. That's not the same. So it was, I think, as far as the timing and just trust your skills were two of the major challenges at the beginning.
And, in terms of skills, so you mentioned in-depth interviews. Have you had to self-train or kind of learn any new skills in particular?
Mm-hmm. I was doing some background kind of support on a diary study, and there's been, journey mapping and jobs to be done that I've taken some initiative to learn more on my own. And of course, AnswerLab has many resources and other people to ask questions. So we have that great kind of culture. And so, I don't want to say that that I did, feel comfortable or anything like that. But you can, learn more as you go, and that's actually really a strength of my, organization. And I think a lot of places will be very open to a scrappy kind of researcher who really likes to learn, new methods, and recognizing that you don't have to know everything at the very beginning too is helpful in the job search.
Linguistic anthropology, you mentioned how when looking at job descriptions, you were sort of using that mindset or that those skills to sort of break down the description. But has that come into play much for you, within the role itself?
Somewhat. It does take a long time to really dig into little bits of language, so I can't do too much in my current role. And but there have been some language-focused projects that I've felt really comfortable and excited about. Or phrasing of questions. I always bring that kind of lens to my research plans to think about the phrasing of a question and how to get to what we need, but also kind of limiting, the scope of the question and help the participant understand what you need from there. And I'm trying to think if I've brought in a lot of those other languagey skills. Definitely, we do sometimes look at each other's work and help each other phrase things. So, as a, in an editing type of situation, I've worked with that. But, when a language focused project comes up, I'm definitely always excited.
That's cool. And so you mentioned, research plan. So in your experience thus far, how does the research plan look different, in industry versus in academia?
Ooh, well, it's shorter and to the point. We talk a little bit about the methods and, which is like 3 bullet point, type of thing, a couple bullet points, and where we write in what type of criteria are involved with the screeners and what kind of participants they're looking for. But the research plan has a couple of objectives that the team is looking for and their main research questions. And then as far as, what our structure is, we go into the script portion of that, which is, kind of a guide, of course, and we don't ask necessarily every single question, but it gives this sense of, I see it as kind of I don't want to say contract, but like a way to demonstrate to the clients that we also, us as moderators, know kind of the breadth of what we are expected to be looking at. It's kind of even before you get into participants, the research plan is a way to align on goals and, share that you recognize their goals and the product. You see what they're getting at. So it's, maybe not every question gets asked, but you have that there as a guide.
Now you mentioned aligning there with the client, which is pretty different than, in academia, right? Unless you're an applied project, presumably, or in many cases, I guess you could make the argument there's not so much a client, maybe a grant funder or something of that nature. Maybe you could stick in there. But what was that process like, learning to align with them? How has that been different from academic research for you, and what do you have to learn around that?
Well, I guess it does have, connections to applied anthropology or participant-designed anthropology. And I, in my role with a handicraft organization, I definitely asked for what can I do for you? What kind of information do you want? So with artisans and, how can I help to fill in any gaps of information that they also wanted, to make sure that my time there was really helpful for them as well as myself. And so that gave me a good kind of starting point to work with clients. And so I was working with the organization as well as artisans. What do you want to share? So, when you're wanting to share your participants' stories and what kind of challenges that they have in their lives in anthropology, same as when you are working with your clients, you want to just, it's that deep listening and asking enough questions to feel like you can really understand their needs. I like to think about what's the goals that might not be explicitly even known, or goals that would come down the line. What is kind of in the background that they're not necessarily asking for at this point, but they might be kind of thinking about, and trying to think about that for clients as well, and get as much insight as we can.
And so, I'd be curious also to maybe pivot here and talk about, your suggestions to others, given how recent this has been for you. And so, if there's maybe one thing or a few things that really stand out that you would like to do different, or would have done different if you could do it over again, anything like that jump out?
For me, it was, I wasn't sure that UX was the way to go. So certainly I would start early. I would recommend to start early in thinking about which direction you want to go in the job search before you're done with school. I was very focused on writing the dissertation and thinking, oh, okay, well, I can deal with that later. But, a pandemic might happen, and you can never know what kind of obstacles will come your way. So yeah, preparing early and thinking about all your options and where your skills will fit. And that's the, definitely top of mind for me because I did take kind of a circuitous route into UX. And question your assumptions about what you think a role entails, and talk to people. Talk to people who are doing that. Use your alumni networks and any LinkedIn as well, or any kind of conferences, and just talk to people. People in UX are very nice. They want to talk, so they want others to succeed. And especially, I think fellow anthropologists recognize that we haven't heard a whole lot about non-academic positions to go into after anthropology, and that's where most of us do end up. So it's important to have those conversations.
Did you try to put together a portfolio? Were you concerned about that?
I had read that a portfolio may or may not be important for a researcher. And so I made one, I did a heuristic evaluation on a website, and I made kind of an auto ethnographic or like auto diary study from myself. And so it was, very low level and, scrappy type of something that I could have perhaps if anyone wanted to look. And I did share it onto resume. It was on my resume in my applications, and but I don't think anyone required it for the applications I was doing. And a lot of them have homeworks, which I actually really loved. It does take time in your application process. So some, find that taxing. But for me, it was if you get nervous in an interview, or if you forget to say something, your homework is a way to put that time into it on your own, and you're able to display a skill. It's not about what I can say I can do. It's about what I can actually do. So I thought that was really valuable in the job search.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially for those who might be shy, to keep in mind. And what else did you do to kind of get your professional presence in order? Obviously we met on LinkedIn, and so, any other tips?
Yes, LinkedIn and, meetups, and they were virtual at that point. Now there's a lot of groups that are meeting in person now, and they can be great for networking and very chill from what I've found, the Denver UX startup or meetup. And I attended startup conferences as well, Startup Week, so Denver and Boulder, and they give you a sense of, industry speak. And so it's a lot of not necessarily only UX, but there are UXers there as well. So I was able to get in the door with as a contract kind of role with some people doing UX contract work. And so I was like subcontractor. And so I was able to do some projects before I was interviewing. And that gave me some things to talk about in interviews and ability to demonstrate the skills prior to, not only just my kind of portfolio, but in a real world application. So I would definitely recommend conferences, any meetups, things like that, finding people on LinkedIn to do informational interviews and getting referrals. But do recognize, the kind of, what I want to say, as far as like the, referrals that there are, especially new hires have a lot. So be patient with that, and recognize that they have a lot going on. If it takes a while to answer back on LinkedIn, because as an introvert, I feel like LinkedIn is a lot at some points. And but the UX community, is very welcoming and really. There are a lot of ways to find mentors as well. ADP list comes to mind. And so there's great resources out there. Lots of good podcasts too.
So, thanks for sharing those recommendations. Anything you'd like to maybe plug, any topics of interest?
So currently at my role, I'm working in the inclusive recruiting task force. And so we're working to make our the participants that we interview look like and represent the national population. So we want to, have all of the census categories look the same across our research participants. So that is an effort that I'm passionate about. So I would definitely recommend some, those who are anthropologists looking to get into UX, check out the AnswerLab's website for inclusive recruiting. They have some resources there. We also have a human-centered work project and lots of great resources to look into, very anthropologically kind of focused work that goes on in UX.
Wonderful. And if anybody wanted to get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find my LinkedIn as I'm just Melissa Krug there.
Very good. Well, Melissa, congrats on the relatively new role. Thanks for coming on. It was nice to talk to you and hear about your sort of experience, recently making that transition.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for listening to the Anthro to UX podcast. To learn everything you need to break into UX, visit anthro2ux.com. There you will find all the podcast episodes and career coaching resources. Please like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.